Welcome to the Ultimate Sports Blog Podcast. Today is Monday, January 7th, 2018. Today I'm going to recap yesterday's two NFL playoff games. And then we'll do guess the lines for the division round. College basketball, NBA, NHL, surprising coach firing in the NBA. My best bet, and I'm going to close the podcast by giving out my pick for tonight's national title game between Alabama and Clemson. To the NFL wildcard round we go. The Chargers defeat the Ravens 23-17. I correctly predicted the Chargers on this podcast. Phillip Rivers, only 22 of 32 with 160 yards. Melvin Gordon, 17 carries for 40 yards with a touchdown. Lamar Jackson was awful, 14 of 29, 194 yards, 2 touchdowns and a pick. I saw a stat that he only had like 60 passing yards through 3 quarters, which was crazy. First quarter, Ravens hold the Chargers to 3 on a 21-yard field goal by Mike Bagley. And then Bagley again for 53 yards, 6-0. Second quarter, 40-yarder by Bagley, 9-0. As time expired in the second quarter, 12-0. Third quarter, Justin Tucker, 33 yards to make it 12-3. Fourth quarter, it gets a little wild. 1-yard run, Melvin Gordon. 2-point conversion pass to Mike Williams was good. 20-3 Chargers. Bagley, 47-yarder, 23-3. And then the Ravens finally get a touchdown, 31 yards from Lamar Jackson to Michael Crabtree, 23-10. And then right after the 2-minute warning, the Ravens make it interesting, 7 yards from Jackson to Michael Crabtree to make it 23-17. There was a crazy play in this game that had to be challenged, whether Melvin Gordon was down, and whether it was a fumble, and it was determined that he was down before the ball crossed the plane, and then the Chargers get the touchdown by Gordon to make it 20-3, or I should say 18-3, then the 2-pointer to make it 20-3. And then the Ravens scored 2 touchdowns in a row after that field goal by Bagley in the fourth quarter to make it respectable. Ravens, I made the case that if they had lost, their season would not be considered a disappointment, only because they turned the page over to Lamar Jackson, and Jackson helped them get to this point. Yeah, Jackson flopped in the biggest spot of the year, but he also deserves credit for taking them to this spot and for hosting a wild card playoff game. I really think that if it weren't for him, they would be home, and the Steelers would have been hosting the Chargers on Wild Card Weekend, and I really was impressed with Jackson down the stretch, and then ultimately he looked like a rookie quarterback starting his first ever playoff game in the biggest spot of the year. Chargers move on to face the Patriots. We'll guess the lines in a couple of minutes. The Eagles defeat the Bears 16-15 on what was a missed field goal by Cody Parkey, and it was a cheap shot or 2. I think it was like 43 yards. That's why it wasn't really a cheap shot. And in cold weather, it hits the upright and then hits the crossbar and hits the upright again, and then it goes in front of the crossbar. So it was no good as Philadelphia moves on to face the Saints. First quarter, Jake Elliott, 43-yarder, 3-0 Philly. That was on their opening drive. Second quarter, Cody Parker, 36-yarder to make it 3-3, and as time expired in the second quarter, 29-yarder to make it 6-3 Bears. Third quarter, Foles to Dallas Goedert, 10-yard touchdown, 10-6 Philly. Fourth quarter, Cody Parkey, 34-yarder, made it 10-9. 22-yard touchdown pass from Mitchell Trubisky to Allen Robinson to make it 15-10. 2-point pass conversion failed. They actually had Khalil Mack on to help out there for the 2-pointer, but it failed. And with 56 seconds left in the game, Golden Tate, 2-yard pass from Nick Foles, 16-15, 2-point conversion run fails. As Chicago drives it down, Parkey misses the field goal, and the Eagles move on to face the Saints. So Chicago, we're evaluating the season for the Ravens just now. I made the case the other day that Chicago, no matter what, their season's a success. And I still stand by it because nobody had this team in the playoffs before the season. Yeah, they turned into a sleeper by some after they traded for Khalil Mack, but nobody had them winning the NFC North before the season. Some people had them as a wild card, but no one had them winning the division. There's difference there. And obviously the addition of Mac helped. The progression of Mitch Trubisky helped. A lot of free agent gets helped. Matt Nagy turns out to be a good hire. This team has a lot to be proud of. And I think it won't be easier for them next year, as I expect Minnesota and Green Bay to be better. Green Bay with a new coach, Minnesota. It just feels like they have to eventually break through with the talent on that roster. And I know they'll make some changes too and improve themselves. So I got to say the Bears season's a success because Trubisky has shown progress. The good coaching hire at Nagy. The defense is among the best in the league, if not the very best in the league. So they have a lot to be proud of this year. And no shame in losing to the reigning Super Bowl champions. And I don't want to hear backup quarterback anymore. Nick Foles is a Super Bowl champion, a Super Bowl MVP. So to me, he's just an overqualified backup that thrives with this team. And he's just a good backup quarterback. And he will get paid by somebody this offseason to become their starting quarterback. I don't know who that's going to be, whether it's Jacksonville. There's talk about the Giants, but I don't see that, even though he's had success with Pat Shurmur in Philadelphia in the past. So it makes sense, but I think the Giants want to draft somebody rather than overpay somebody that was property of their division rival. So Nick Foles is just an incredible story, and he deserves credit. And credit to myself, because I said Dallas Goedert could have a surprise impact in the playoffs. And then he scores that touchdown. So I have to give myself props. And tomorrow I'm going to come back with power rankings, re-ranking the playoff teams for most likely to win the Super Bowl out of the 8 remaining. And then Blake Jarwin had another big game for Dallas. Leonard Floyd had a big impact in that game. Kiki Cootie, I believe, caught the touchdown pass in the Texans game. Ty Montgomery didn't do anything. Malik Hooker played a good game in Houston. I'm going over my surprising players list. Seahawks, Trey Flowers, he didn't do much. Justin Jackson didn't do much because Melvin Gordon was healthy. And in the 4 guys I picked for the teams that had first-round byes are remain to be seen. So a fantastic win for the Eagles and such a crushing loss for the Bears. And the other case against the Bears is that sometimes it takes a long time to get over a crushing loss like that. A lot of teams have a hard time doing that. Look at the Atlanta Falcons. They really haven't recovered from that Super Bowl loss yet, have they? But a good example of this is I remember the Giants in 2010 lost a very rough regular season game at home to Philadelphia, in which Deshaun Jackson ran back the game-winning punt return for touchdown. Giants had a big lead in the game. They blew it. Deshaun Jackson runs it back the other way for the win. Eagles win the NFC East. And the Giants, after that game, got their butts kicked by Green Bay, who ends up winning the Super Bowl that year. And then they win a game that they had to have against the Redskins, but a couple things broke against them, so they didn't make the playoffs. They went 10-6, didn't make the playoffs, courtesy of the Deshaun Jackson run. But the Giants got over that the next year and ended up going 9-7, though, winning the NFC East. But sure enough, they go on and win the second Super Bowl in Eli Manning's career. So that's a case of getting over a bad loss like that. But we'll see with the Bears. And the case against that I laid out was Atlanta. And then the Seahawks never really got over that loss in the Super Bowl. when Russell Wilson threw the pick in the end zone instead of giving it to Marshawn Lynch. Yeah, they've had good seasons after that, meaning good regular seasons and playoff appearances after that, but they haven't been back to the Super Bowl since then. So we'll see with the Bears and how they recover from what was such a heartbreaking defeat. Guess the lines for the division round. These are pretty easy to pick, in my opinion. We're going to start on Saturday evening, 4:30 on NBC. It'll be Al Michaels, Chris Collinsworth, and Michelle Tafoya on the call. The Indianapolis Colts are at the Kansas City Chiefs. And I have the Kansas City Chiefs favored by 6.5 points. Kansas City, right now, as we speak, is a 5-point favorite. So, I was 1.5 points off there. Saturday night, 8:15 on Fox, you have the Dallas Cowboys at the Los Angeles Rams. It's either going to be Joe Buck or Kevin Burkhardt doing the play-by-play. Don't you think that Fox is going to purposely put Joe Buck on the Cowboys game? We'll see. I'd be surprised if Joe Buck isn't doing the Cowboys game. It would have been a lock for Joe Buck if it was Cowboys-Saints, but it's Cowboys-Rams. But at the same time, you'd think you'd be surprised if Joe Buck wasn't calling the Saints game. But I think they would like to put their best announcer on the biggest brand team left in the playoffs. That is the Dallas Cowboys. So I assume it's going to be Joe Buck, Troy Aikman, Aaron Andrews, and Chris Myers on the call. I have the Los Angeles Rams as a 7-point favorite at home against the Dallas Cowboys, and that's what the line is. So a correct pick by me. 1 o'clock on CBS, the Chargers are at the Patriots. Jim Nantz, Tony Romo, Tracy Wolfson will be on the call. I have the Patriots as a 4-point favorite over the Chargers. And right now the Patriots are favored by 4.5, so it's a 0.5 point off there. And last but not least, the Eagles at the Saints, 4:40 on Fox. I assume this is going to be Kevin Burkhardt and Charles Davis, but it could be Joe Buck and Troy Aikman. It's remained to be seen because Philly won, so that kind of changes the announcers' projections for me. It would have been a no-brainer lock for Buck and Aikman if it was Cowboys-Saints. But now that the Cowboys are playing the Rams, it's not a lock anymore because I feel like they'll put their best announcers on the biggest brands. And you usually see that by all the announcing teams in any sport, per se. But there are some, weird exceptions, like if the Knicks in basketball are in the playoffs, they would, I think, purposely put Mike Breen on there, even though he's their top announcer, but Mike Breen's also the voice of the Knicks. Fox did this in the playoffs last year for baseball. They purposely put Joe Davis on Dodgers Braves because Joe Davis is the voice of the Dodgers. And if it was, say, Dodgers Cubs in round 1, that would have been Joe Buck. And if it was Dodgers Rockies in round 1, maybe it is still Joe Davis, and then they put Kenny Albert on Braves Brewers or whatever it could have been. But they ended up putting Kenny Albert on Rockies Brewers and Joe Davis, who's the voice of the Dodgers, on Dodgers Braves. And Joe Davis is ahead of Kenny Albert on the totem pole with Fox. But if it was two brand teams in the playoffs, they probably would go with Joe Buck. But sometimes they go with the team's own announcer with the big brands, like you see with ESPN, ABC with the Knicks, and then you saw it last year in the baseball playoffs with the Dodgers with Joe Davis. So back to the division lines. I have the Saints as an 8.5 point favorite at home against the Philadelphia Eagles. New Orleans is an 8-point favorite right now, so I was a 0.5 point off. So I came very close with a lot of these lines, and I nailed Cowboys-Rams with the 7. We're going to move on to college basketball right now. From yesterday, there wasn't many games, but there's some notable results. DePaul upsets Seton Hall 75-74. DePaul improves to 9-5. Seton Hall drops to 11-4. Number 16 Marquette defeats Xavier 70-52. Marquette 12-3. Xavier 9-7. Dayton defeats Richmond 72-48. Dayton 9-5. Richmond 6-8. Northwestern defeats Illinois 68-66. Northwestern 10-5. Illinois 4-11. Navy defeats Holy Cross 50-48. Navy 5-8. Holy Cross 10-5. George Washington upsets St. Joe's 70-56. George Washington 5-9. St. Joe's 7-7. Colgate defeats American 73-69. Colgate 9-6. American 7-6. Lehigh defeats Loyola Maryland 89-72. Lehigh 9-4. Loyola Maryland 4-11. North Dakota State defeats Dickinson State 85-53. North Dakota State improves to 7-10. Temple defeats Wichita State 85-81 in overtime. Temple goes to 11-3. Wichita drops to 7-7. St. Louis defeats Rhode Island 60-53. St. Louis 10-4. Rhode Island 7-6. George Mason defeats St. Bonaventure 68-53. George Mason 8-7. St. Bonaventure 4-10. Number 2 Michigan defeats number 21 Indiana 74-63. Michigan 15-0. Indiana 12-3. South Dakota State defeats South Dakota 79-61. South Dakota State 12-6. South Dakota 7-9. Number 25 Iowa upsets number 24 Nebraska 93-84. Yes, Iowa was a home underdog, so that's an upset. Iowa 12-3. Nebraska 11-4. Louisville defeats Miami 90-73. Louisville 10-4. Miami 8-6. Number 19 Houston defeats Memphis 90-77. Houston 15-0. Memphis 9-6. Number 22, Wisconsin defeats Penn State 71-52. Wisconsin 11-4, Penn State 7-8, and USC defeats Stanford 77-66. USC 9-6, Stanford 7-7. Not a lot of games on tonight. No big name teams tonight, only because of the college football national title game. 7 o'clock Niagara Fairfield, 7:30 Coppin State Delaware State, Howard Maryland Eastern, Savannah State Morgan State, 8 o'clock Florida A&M Norfolk State, 8:30 Texas Southern, Prairie View and Alcorn State, Jackson State Alabama State, Grambling and Alabama A&M, and at 9 o'clock Eastern Washington and Northern Colorado. Now I'm going to go over the new AP poll rankings for college hoops. Duke's 1, 2 Michigan, 3 Tennessee, 4 Virginia, 5 Gonzaga, who's new to the top 5. 6 is Michigan State, 7 Kansas, 8 Texas Tech, 9 Virginia Tech, 10 Nevada. So Nevada only drops 5 spots. Or 4. 11's Auburn, 12 you have North Carolina, 13 Florida State, 14 Mississippi State, 15 North Carolina State, 16 Ohio State, 17 Houston, 18 Kentucky, 19 Buffalo, 20 Iowa State. Good for Iowa State getting in there. 21's Marquette, 22 Indiana, 23 Oklahoma, 24, new to the rankings, St. John's. Well deserved, finally. They were undefeated, and then they did lose at the buzzer to Seton Hall, but that was courtesy of a bad call. And then they bounced back in a big way, beat Marquette by 20, and then they get the road win at Georgetown. Well deserved. And 25 is TCU. And they also belong in these rankings. So takeaways here, Villanova's not ranked, neither is Wisconsin. Minnesota deserves some love, I think. And Seton Hall obviously does not deserve to be ranked because they lost to DePaul. Maryland deserves a little bit more love than this. Nebraska deserved the drop after losing back-to-back games. Iowa, they're good, but they're not a team that should be ranked. Kansas only falls 2 spots despite losing their starting center for the season, which is a big loss for that team who can shoot the 3 ball. And he's just a very good player. And I'm talking about Udoka Azubuike. Now we're going to move on to the NBA. Wasn't many games last night. The Nets defeat the Bulls 117-100. Brooklyn goes to 20-21. Chicago drops to 10-30. The Timberwolves defeat the Lakers 108-86. Minnesota 19-21. Lakers 21-19. The Clippers defeat the Magic 106-96. LA 23-16. Orlando 17-22. The Hawks defeat the Heat 106-82. The Hawks 12-27. Miami's 19-19. The Wizards defeat the Thunder 116-98. Huge win for Washington. Bad loss for Oklahoma City. Washington 16-24. Oklahoma City 25-14. The Raptors defeat the Pacers 121-105. Toronto 30-12. Indiana 26-13. And last but not least, the Hornets defeat the Suns 119-113. Charlotte 19-20. Phoenix 9-32. Tonight's NBA slate at 7 o'clock, you have the Spurs at the Pistons, 7:30 the Nets at the Celtics, 8 o'clock the Nuggets at the Rockets, the Jazz at the Bucks, the Grizzlies at the Pelicans, 8:30 the Lakers at the Mavericks, 10 o'clock the Magic at the Kings, and the Knicks at the Trailblazers. NHL. 7 games on the slate last night. The Hurricanes defeat the Senators 5-4. Carolina 19-17-5. Ottawa 15-23-5. The Golden Knights defeat the Devils 3-2. Vegas 26-15-4. New Jersey 16-18-7. The Capitals defeat the Red Wings 3-2. Washington 25-12-4. Detroit 16-21-7. The Coyotes defeat the Rangers 5-0. Arizona 18-21-3. New York 17-17-1. The Jets defeat the Stars 5-1. Winnipeg 26-13-2. Dallas 22-17-4. The Blackhawks upset the Penguins 5-3. Chicago 16-21-7. Pittsburgh 23-13-6. And the Oilers defeat the Ducks 4-0. The Oilers 20-19-3. And Anaheim 19-17-7. So a big win for Edmonton there on the road. Tonight's slate, only 5 games. Good job by the NHL not scheduling that many games, but a bad job by the NHL by putting a game on NBCSN in the middle of the biggest college football game of the calendar year. And that's a bad job by the NBA by scheduling a lot of games too. I would only schedule 2 or 3. And good job by college basketball by not scheduling big name schools in Power 5 conferences. So, NHL schedule for tonight, 7 o'clock, you have the Predators at the Maple Leafs, the Blues at the Flyers, 7:30 Wild at the Canadiens, 8:30 the Flames at the Blackhawks, and 10:30 NBCSN, the Kings at the Sharks. I think the Sharks are going to destroy the Kings. Give me 4-2 San Jose. Wouldn't be surprised if it's more than that. Big NBA news last night, the Minnesota Timberwolves had fired Tom Thibodeau after 2+ years as the Timberwolves head coach. Didn't make the playoffs in year 1, and he made it in year 2. And they lost in 5 games last year to the Houston Rockets. Minnesota needed a win on the last day of the season to make the playoffs. They made it over Denver. And Minnesota ended up making the postseason over Denver, losing in 5 to Houston. They trade Jimmy Butler in the beginning of the season in November. And then the team was playing a little better. And then there's always dysfunction with Thibodeau and that front office. That franchise is just a dumpster fire. They remind me of the Tampa Bay Buccaneers in the sense that they're always firing coaches and GMs, and it's just a mess. And Karl Anthony Towns is one of the best players in the league, and he just signed the big contract extension this summer. I wonder how he's feeling right now, because I think he liked Tom Thibodeau. And Thibs, we'll see if he gets another chance. A lot of people think that he will, but I'm not sure if his style works in today's NBA anymore. And they're talking about Fred Hoiberg replacing Thibodeau, which is funny because obviously Hoiberg replaced Thibodeau in Chicago, and then Hoiberg ended up getting fired from Chicago this year. The intern coach right now for Minnesota is assistant coach Ryan Saunders, 32 years old, the son of the late Flip Saunders, and obviously Flip Saunders was the coach of the Timberwolves that unfortunately passed away before, I think it was the 2015 season. And now Saunders gets to be the intern coach. I'm talking about Ryan Saunders. We'll see how he does. And Chauncey Billups was a possible rumor for the GM job. As we know, Billups was a candidate for the Cavs GM job last year, 2 years ago, whenever that was, and he turned it down. And we'll see if Chauncey gets an opportunity to interview at Minnesota. And I'm interested to see if Minnesota down the road trades the two guys they got in the Butler trade, Dario Saric and Robert Covington, because they would draw interest for contenders. I don't think those guys should be kept on Minnesota's roster. The only keeper is Karl Anthony Towns to me at this point. And it's going to be interesting to see what happens if Saunders ends up getting the job full-time and see how well he does. And obviously Hoiberg's a candidate. And they're not the only team fighting for him. The other team that's fighting for Hoiberg's rights is actually a college school, and that's UCLA. And I think Hoiberg's better suited for UCLA than the Timberwolves, only because he's had more success in college than he did in the pros. And let's not forget, he didn't do the best job with the Bulls last year, so he's better off returning to college to return what was once a prominent school back to glory than talking about UCLA. Before I do my pick for tonight's big game between Alabama and Clemson, I'm going to go over my best bet of the day, brought to you by DraftKings. Morgan State, Norfolk State, Texas Southern, Northern Colorado, all on the money line in college hoops. And then Ashley Barty in tennis over Jelena Ostapenko. Solane Stevens over Ekaterina Alexandrova. And those two matches are going to be going on tonight. And then the Portland Trailblazers over the New York Knicks. Now, for the moment you all been waiting for, my pick for the national championship game tonight. 8:15, ESPN, Chris Fowler, Kirk Herbstreit, Maria Taylor, and Tom Rinaldi on the call. Your one-seeded Alabama Crimson Tide versus two-seeded Clemson Tigers. Here we go. Fourth straight season, these teams meet in the postseason. And the third time in 4 years, these two meet in the national championship game. The Tide are coming off a comfortable win in the semifinal against the Oklahoma Sooners. The Tigers are coming off a dominant win in the semifinal over the Notre Dame Fighting Irish, in which star defensive tackle Dexter Lawrence served a drug suspension for, and he's also out for tonight's game as well. Kyler Murray was able to have success against the Tide secondary, and I think Trevor Lawrence can do the same with his weapons on offense. Lawrence's absence in this game will prove to be a big loss, as Tua Tagovailoa will be able to be more comfortable without his presence. Although they still have Klein and Farrell and Christian Wilkins on that defensive line. Those two guys are studs too. Those two guys will have an impact in this game, but no Lawrence opens things up for Tua just a little bit. That said, I'm not sold on the Tigers secondary either, and Tagovailoa is always great at getting guys open too. That said, I think Alabama wins a close one and repeats as champions in Santa Clara, courtesy of Tagovailoa and the fact that I think Nick Saban's defense can get a few more stops in what I think will be a shootout. Alabama 34, Clemson 30. Offensive MVP, I'm going to say Tagovailoa. Defensive MVP, Quinnen Williams, the great defensive tackle for the Tide. And I think, like I said, it's going to be a phenomenal game. And obviously, my gambling play here is Clemson plus 5.5. Because I think Clemson and Trevor Lawrence will be ready for this game. It's going to be a shootout, but I trust Tua more. I'll obviously open tomorrow's podcast with this game. And then we'll go over what's next for both these programs. And just talk about the game in general. And then we will go over what went on in the other sports and any other news that happens in the world of sports, and also do NFL power rankings for the remaining playoff teams as well. I hope you guys have a great day.